With only 16 days to go until the release of the Switch 2, I thought this might be a good time to reflect on the games that are available under the Nintendo Classics banner. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be ranking the best and worst games for every classic console available through the Nintendo Switch Online and expansion pack services. To do that, we're going to use the average scores from Electronic Gaming Monthly, GamePro, Next Generation, Mean Machines, Edge, Computers and Video Games, and more classic magazines that reviewed these games when they first came out. We're going to kick things off today with a look at the Sega Genesis, which has amassed a total of 50 games since it first debuted in October of 2021. In case you didn't know, we've actually covered every single one of these games in our Review Crew series, where we look back to see what the critics said back in the 1990s. Unfortunately, there were no English language reviews for Pulseman, so we can't rank it. But even without that, I think you're going to agree that we have an extremely stacked list of games. So what I want you to do is brace yourself for a whole lot of blast processing, because today we're going to be taking a look at the top 49 Genesis games on Nintendo Classics.
Dave Whitney wanted the real arcade games at home, so he got them. Mike Rogers wanted them too, but he got a Genesis system by Sega, with games that look, play, and sound like the real arcade games because they are the arcade games. Besides, Genesis has real-life action in sports games, flying games, and adventure games, the hottest library going. So if you want real arcade action, there's only two ways to get it.
Dave, we got your golden axe.
Or get Genesis by Sega. We bring the arcade experience home.
Alright, we're gonna kick things off with number 49, Altered Beast. While many were impressed by the arcade quality graphics found in this Genesis pack-in, Altered Beast ended up being a little bit too short and shallow for the critics. Many complained about the easy difficulty and all too brief story, which ran a meager 20 minutes. Number 48, Super Thunder Blade. Super Thunder Blade was another Genesis launch game that didn't fare particularly well with the critics. Many complained about the choppy scaling effects and all of the cheap hits that you'll take along the way. This was a big miss for Sega in the early days of the Genesis. Number 47, Target Earth. The first installment in the Assault Suit franchise, Target Earth kicked things off with an ominous start, with basically every English language magazine giving the game a 6 out of 10. The critics liked the graphics, but were frustrated by the game that got too difficult too quickly. The words disappointing and nothing spectacular kept coming up in one review after another. Number 46, Light Crusader. One of Treasure's lesser-known games, Light Crusader was not as beloved by the critics as Gunstar Heroes or even Dynamite Headdy. Next Generation said what pretty much everybody was thinking. There isn't enough action for the action fans, and the RPG elements are too simplistic for RPG fans. It's not a bad game per se, but definitely not up to Treasure's usual standards. Number 45, Space Harrier II. The critics like Space Harrier II a bit more than Super Thunder Blade, but many of the same criticisms seeped over into this fantasy-themed shoot-'em-up. More than anything else, this arcade port is a stark reminder that the Genesis just isn't very good at scaling and rotation effects. Things needed to produce a convincing and entertaining version of Space Harrier. Number 44, Virtua Fighter 2. There's no question that Virtua Fighter 2 is one of the greatest fighting games of all time, but not on the Genesis. This weird 2D version completely misses the point, with critics complaining that the scaled-down port doesn't look, feel, or play like the arcade classic. Number 43, Flicky. An early generation port of an arcade game that dates back all the way to 1984. Flicky is one of those love it or hate it games. Mega Play and Electronic Gaming Monthly hated it, but Mean Machines and Computer and Video Games loved it. I'll break the tie by saying that it's just okay, nothing special. Number 42, Golden Axe 2, a disappointing sequel to one of the top-rated Genesis games. The critics complained that it was a retread and lacked any new ideas, all while disparaging the lousy graphics and poorly animated characters. The overall consensus was that Golden Axe 2 failed to push the series forward in any meaningful way. Number 41, Mega Man: The Wily Wars. While the critics were definitely excited to see Mega Man make his way to the Genesis, many were underwhelmed by the slightly upgraded graphics and the recycled levels. Essentially a greatest hits package for the Blue Bomber, the Wily Wars paled in comparison to Mega Man X on the Super NES. Number 40, M.U.S.H.A. Now you and I may look back at M.U.S.H.A. as one of the best shoot-'em-ups of the 16-bit era, but the critics at the time weren't so sure. Many of the critics liked the seismic shooter well enough, but it didn't quite rise to the level of Thunder Force 3 or Gyruss. Along with Zero Wing, M.U.S.H.A. is the best shoot-'em-up on the Nintendo Switch Online service. Number 39, Alien Storm. Alien Storm is more than just a spiritual successor to Golden Axe. Believe it or not, it's actually connected to Sega's fantasy-themed brawler. Set in a vague future where you play an alien hunter, this repetitive beat-em-up offers a lot of cool-looking aliens and a few first-person shooter sections. But even with that, it never quite reaches the same heights as Sega's other brawlers. Number 38, Beyond Oasis. A criminally overshadowed and underrated Legend of Zelda clone developed by Yuzo Koshiro. You know, the guy who composed some of the very best video game music to come out of the 1990s. While diehard game fan beat the drum as hard as they could for Beyond Oasis, everybody else just kinda shrugged. Next Generation complained that it's an RPG. Wait, no, it's an action game. Oh well, it's both. Oh, the horror of having to review an action RPG. Number 37, Columns. In the wake of Tetris, Sega was quick to port their own arcade hit, Columns. While a solid port of a so-so game, the critics felt that this gem-focused puzzler was just a little bit too similar and not as addictive as Tetris. The result was a lot of tepid recommendations. Number 36, Sonic the Hedgehog Spinball. The critics loved the concept of a Sonic-themed pinball game, but many complained about the weird gameplay and confusing stages. There were a few magazines that just fell in love with it, giving it near-perfect scores. Your mileage may vary on this one. Number 35, ESWAT, City Under Siege. Landing somewhere between Narc and RoboCop is ESWAT, City Under Siege, a side-scrolling action game that feels like a futuristic Shinobi sequel. The critics mostly liked the fast-paced action, though Game Zone gave it their lowest possible score, a 1 out of 6. Yeah, Game Zone is kinda the worst. And speaking of zones, number 34, Comix Zone. The incredibly stylish Comix Zone is guaranteed to grab your attention from the very first frame, but the critics were frustrated by the extreme difficulty and some questionable controls. With extreme scores on both sides, Comix Zone is the kind of game that you either love or hate. Personally, I love it. And we're back with number 33, MERCS. While not on the same level as the other Capcom conversions like Ghouls N Ghosts and Strider, MERCS was a solid enough run-and-gun shoot-'em-up that featured two different versions of the arcade hit. Unfortunately, pretty much everybody was disappointed by the lack of multiplayer support. Number 32, Shining Force 2. While not as critically acclaimed as the 1993 original, this Shining Force sequel is still a worthy successor that adds a lot of lore and gameplay. Ignore the somewhat low review average, because if you're a fan of Fire Emblem or just fantasy-themed strategy games, then this is an absolute must-play. Number 31, Ristar. While nowhere near as endearing or even remembered as Sonic the Hedgehog, this late-generation Genesis platformer from Sega still delivered great graphics and complex level designs. Confusingly, magazines like Next Generation, Game Players, and Sega Force gave it low scores, despite raving that it was one of the best platformers of the year. Review scores are weird. Number 30, Super Fantasy Zone. If you've never played Super Fantasy Zone before, then, well, it's probably because the Sunsoft-developed sequel was never released in the United States. Oh sure, it came to Europe and Japan, but I guess Sega must have figured that Americans wouldn't be all that into a colorful shoot-'em-up. That's a shame, because it's actually a lot of fun. Number 29, Phantasy Star IV. When it was first released, Phantasy Star IV retailed for a whopping $100. To put that in context, that's well over $200 in today's money. That may not explain the somewhat low scores for this beloved role-playing game, but it is a reminder the games used to be crazy expensive. Yeah, consider that the next time you complain about spending $80 on a new Mario Kart. Number 28, Sword of Vermilion. Released at a time when Western audiences were still a little conflicted when it came to Japanese role-playing games, Sword of Vermilion tries to split the difference and offer something a little bit more accessible. The critics were largely receptive, scoring it a little bit higher than other role-playing games of that era, including the fan-favorite Phantasy Star IV. Number 27, Thunder Force 2. While it may not be the Thunder Force game that people want, it is the one and only Thunder Force game that we have. Sure, it's nowhere close to being on the same level as the higher-profile sequels, but there's still a whole lot of shoot-'em-up fun to be mined out of Thunder Force 2. Number 26, Crusader of Centy. One of several great adventure games inspired by The Legend of Zelda, Crusader of Centy has a lot going for it. Some critics complained that it was a little bit too derivative of other adventure games, but most liked it enough to give it a strong recommendation. Sadly, this 16-bit classic was completely overshadowed by A Link to the Past on the Super NES. Number 25, Kid Chameleon. They may not have the best graphics, but Kid Chameleon has a shocking amount of depth. It's a massive game with hundreds of levels and all kinds of power-ups to uncover. While the critics liked many of the new concepts found in this action game, they felt that it didn't all come together to make a cohesive package. Number 24, Zero Wing. Well, it's often mocked for having poor localization. Zero Wing defies bad grammar by being one of the greatest shoot-'em-ups of all time. The critics were impressed with this Toplin arcade port, raving about the story, the cinemas, and the fast-paced action. Shooter fans looking for a challenge should look no further than Zero Wing. Number 23, Alien Soldier. A classic run-and-gun shooter that very few magazines reviewed due to it being limited to the short-lived Sega channel. Now, 30 years later, Nintendo Switch Online subscribers can enjoy one of Treasure's most underrated games. If you like Gunstar Heroes and Contra, then you owe it to yourself to battle it out through Alien Soldier. Number 22, Castlevania Bloodlines. The critics were a little bit thrown off by the World War setting and the brand new characters, but they ultimately felt that Bloodlines was worthy of the Castlevania name. That said, many complained that it was a step backwards after Super Castlevania IV on the Super Nintendo. Number 21, Contra Hardcore. Contra Hardcore is one of the more divisive games of the long-running series, with some appreciating the wild risks that it takes, while others were left complaining about the extreme difficulty and goofy characters. Many argue that it's just not as good as Contra 3 on the Super Nintendo. Number 20, Shining Force. At a time when Nintendo was dubious that American gamers would get into the Fire Emblem series, Sega was full speed ahead with their own fantasy-themed strategy game. Shining Force is surprisingly easy to get into and has a compelling enough story to get you from one exciting battle to the next. It's really only this low on the list because early 90s critics were confused by both strategy and role-playing games. Number 19, ToeJam Earl. Critics weren't sure what to make about the funky duo when they first debuted in 1991. While most liked the co-op play and the leisurely pacing, many were left scratching their head by the weirdness. Some didn't even understand what they were supposed to be doing, leading to a few low scores. Number 18, Alisia Dragoon. Ah yes, the all too familiar story of a girl and her dragon. GamePro ended up giving Alisia Dragoon a perfect score, while diehard game fans suggested that this action platformer was a good way to kick depression. On the other hand, the naysayers called it repetitive and boring, resulting in an average of 86%. Number 17, Vector Man. A fun run-and-gun shoot-'em-up made in the wake of Donkey Kong Country. By using 3D models instead of the usual pixel sprites, Vector Man manages to stand out from the system's many high-rated shooters. Sure, it's not universally loved, but it packs enough action for anybody that's sick of Earthworm Jim and Gunstar Heroes.
Young Bobby Engels has a problem. He needs to earn the respect of his peers. So he gets the special Sega Genesis fighting system. It comes with Streets of Rage 2. He saves $40. He gets more moves. He gets more control. Now things are pretty much okay.
I said chocolate chip. Say it. Say it.
Sega!
And we're back with number 16, Shinobi 3, Return of the Ninja Master. If you ask me, Shinobi 3 is easily one of the 5 best Genesis games of all time. But frustratingly, the critics' average has it sitting at number 16. EGM called it the best game in the Shinobi series, but Sega Power disagreed, dragging that average down with a so-so 79%. Oh man, it's definitely better than that. Number 15, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Also known as Puyo Puyo or even Kirby's Avalanche, the Sonic-themed reskin captures everything that people loved about the original puzzler, all while adding a little bit to Dr. Robotnik's lore. While EGM and Hyper complained that it wasn't as good as Tetris, everybody else fell in love with this addictive and surprisingly competitive puzzle game. Number 14, Dynamite Headdy. Released at a time when pretty much everybody wanted more Gunstar Heroes, Dynamite Headdy is a jarring left turn for treasure. It's a head-butting platformer where our puppet hero wears different types of heads in order to battle all kinds of the craziest bosses of the 16-bit era. Largely overshadowed, this is a weird game that remains a lot of fun. Not at the same level as Gunstar, but still one of Treasure's best. Number 13, Golden Axe. The legendary arcade beat-em-up managed to come home with almost everything intact. The critics loved the 2-player mode, the fantasy-themed levels, and the detailed graphics and animation. Sega Mega Drive Advance even compared it to wetting your pants, only in a good way. Don't ask. Number 12, ToeJam Earl in Panic on Funkotron. Side-scrolling sequel to one of the weirdest Genesis games ever made, ToeJam Earl and Panic on Funkotron shook up the formula in a lot of fun ways. That said, some critics actually preferred the original gameplay, while diehard game fan wished that it had more of a heavy metal soundtrack instead of funk. Number 11, Earthworm Jim. Easily one of the best-looking 16-bit games ever made. Earthworm Jim is just oozing with personality. This is Shiny at their absolute best, a well-oiled machine that knew the ins and outs of the Genesis better than pretty much anybody else, maybe even Sega. Next Generation may have been a little bit disappointed that it wasn't revolutionary, but I doubt that anybody that plays the game today is going to complain about that. Number 10, Gunstar Heroes. Now, if you're a little bit surprised to see Gunstar Hero this low on the list, then you can thank Edge, who dropped the average with their contrarian review, giving this run-and-gun shooter an insane 6 out of 10. With either perfect or near-perfect scores from almost all of the gaming press, this really is one of the most celebrated 16-bit games of all time, no matter what Edge wants you to believe. Number 9, Ghouls N Ghosts. A fantastic port of an amazing arcade game, Ghouls N Ghosts was exactly what the Genesis needed in its early days. The critics were gobsmacked by the perfectly recreated levels, the massive boss fights, and the spooky tunes, with Electronic Gaming Monthly even going as far as to name it the Game of the Year in 1989. Number 8, Streets of Rage 2. The stellar sequel to the landmark brawler, Streets of Rage 2 is everything the critics wanted in a follow-up. It's got better graphics, cooler levels, and harder bosses. While most loved the sequel, it's curious that some magazines, like Electronic Gaming Monthly, chose not to review one of the biggest Genesis games of that year. Number 7, Strider. Another incredible Capcom port, Strider is a winning Genesis conversion. The critics honestly couldn't believe how close it got to the arcade original, with many tripping all over themselves to rave about the 8 megabit cartridge. Now, just for reference, that's 8 megabits, or 1 megabyte. Yeah, it was a different time. Number 6, the Revenge of Shinobi. No, the Nintendo Classics version does not include Godzilla, or Spider-Man, or even the Terminator. But hey, don't hold that against it, because this is still an incredible action game that anybody can get into. Across the board, the critics fell in love with the Shinobi sequel, preferring it over Shinobi 3 and Shadow Dancer. Number 5, Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition. While the critics may have preferred Street Fighter II Turbo on the Super NES, that doesn't matter, because this Genesis port, a Special Champion Edition, is the only Street Fighter on the service. Sure, it lacks a few colors, and the familiar music is awfully tinny. But let me tell you, there are certainly worse ways to play Street Fighter 2. Number 4, Landstalker. While it may have been inspired by The Legend of Zelda, this Genesis adventure game developed by Climax has more than enough unique ideas to stand on its own. The critics loved it, imploring gamers to get used to the weird gameplay and discover one of the best adventure games on the Genesis. Number 3, Ecco the Dolphin. One of the most unique adventure games to come out of the 16-bit generation, Ecco the Dolphin was a welcome shift from the usual shooters and platformers. The critics really got into solving the underwater puzzles and got sucked into the science fiction story. Many consider this to be one of the best Genesis games ever made. Number 2, Streets of Rage. An absolutely pivotal game for Sega in 1991. After fans were let down by a disappointing port of Final Fight, Sega swooped in with Streets of Rage. An even better beat 'em up with more levels, more fighters, and 2-player support. The critics ate it up, giving the brawler near-perfect scores across the board. It's a true Genesis classic. And finally, at number 1, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This hotly anticipated sequel did not disappoint. With faster gameplay, better level designs, and a brand new co-op hero to play around with, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 delighted both fans and critics. They were especially impressed with the various 2-player modes and the innovations found in each stage. Sega actually listened to the criticism of the first game and delivered not just one of the most iconic platformers, but also one of the top Genesis games ever made.
Now, when you buy the Sega Genesis that comes with Sonic 1, you'll get Sonic 2 absolutely free. Sonic 2 handles stubborn stains, embarrassing bald spots, no problem. It even slices and dices, makes thousands of julienne fries. But wait, you can play it too. This free Sonic 2 is a $54.99 value. You get 2 Sonics for the price of 1. Sonic 2 fits easily into any tackle box. Made from a space-age polymer plastic for years of family fun, and pets love it too. Buy the Sega Genesis that comes with Sonic 1 and get Sonic 2 free. Act now. Wiener Dog Sweater sold separately.
Hey, thanks for watching me count down these classic games. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we're going to be posting new episodes just like this one that are going to be counting down the different consoles leading up to the Switch 2. I'm talking about the Game Boy Advance, the Super NES, the Nintendo 64, and more. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite Genesis game? Oh, can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with a review of Neon Apex. While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,